Hey, this is Troy Taylor from the Championship Football Coaches Clinic, but it's getting bigger than football because what a pleasure it is today to have Coach Kevin Eastman, who I met through a mutual friend, John Gordon. And John Gordon was our basketball coach at Meadowbrook High School, and now he's the superintendent of Suffolk County Schools in Virginia. So, Coach Eastman, thank you so much for coming on. You're a very busy man. I hit you up because I watched Air, and that movie was like, wow, Sonny Vaccaro was special. And then I started learning about Coach Rav, and I was like, wow, this guy is like amazing. So, Coach Eastman, for everybody out there, tell us a little bit about yourself, Coach, and where you're from.
Well, you mentioned the movie, and you mentioned Sonny, and you mentioned George. I know George much better than Sonny. So I grew up in southern New Jersey, just across the river from Philadelphia. Went to the University of Richmond in Richmond, Virginia, obviously. And, yeah, so that's how I've had so many relationships built over time in the greater Richmond area, and consequently our connection here. But I've always played basketball. It was my first love back when I was in junior high school. I think we called it middle school in New Jersey.
Yes,
so
sir.
Back in middle school, and the love and the passion started to grow each and every year. And as it grew, I would be out on the court more and more each and every day, each and every year. Turned me into a pretty good player, got a scholarship to the University of Richmond, had a chance to play professionally in a league that eventually folded. Then I had to figure out what I wanted to do. And I loved the game. I loved working with players. I loved helping players get better. Loved maybe getting them to see that they can actually do some things they didn't think they could do. So that got me into college coaching at the University of Richmond. And then since then, it's been a marathon, but at a sprint pace. So, I was at the University of Richmond. Then I was at Colorado State. Then I was at VCU. I was at Tulsa. I was at Belmont Abbey College, UNC Wilmington, and then eventually had an opportunity to join Doc Rivers with the Boston Celtics. So all in all, I was a college coach for 22 years, 11 as an assistant, I believe, and 11 as a head coach. And then 13 years as an NBA coach.
In all those stops, who were the coaches that had the most influence on your life? Because I think of like, did you coach for Coach Dick Tarrant at University of Richmond, or were you before him, Coach? Like, who were the coaches that influenced you?
Yeah, well, early on, it was my high school coach, Dave Wiedemann, because he was a little bit younger at the time than some of the other coaches we competed against, and he would actually come out and play with us sometimes.
Wow.
And it was kind of neat that you had a guy who not only taught you the game, but sweated with you throughout the game in the off season. So he was number one. And then after that, obviously my college coaches, but ironically enough, a coach from Randolph-Macon College by the name of Hal Nunley. We befriended each other, and I learned a lot from him. Even though he's not a named coach, you can learn a lot from people who have a lot of knowledge and wisdom. So you mentioned Dick Tarrant. I did coach under Dick for a year. And then probably from that point, there was a guy by the name of Lou Getz who coached at the University of Richmond and hired me for my first college job. And Lou had come from Duke, and Duke was starting to turn themselves around under a guy by the name of Bill Foster. So Lou took the big-time college system and organization and brought it to Richmond. So I got to learn early on how to organize a program, how to make it run from A to Z, not just what system you're going to run on the floor. And then I guess after that, it became some of the professional contacts. Doc Rivers, who I worked with for 13 years, I believe, in the NBA. Tremendous influence. George Raveling, who we mentioned. I coached at Washington State University. George, a number of years prior to me, coached at Washington State University. So when we became acquaintances and ultimately became very close friends, which we are today, He's a man that carries in his head a tremendous amount of wisdom. But the best part about it is he just doesn't want to keep it in his head. He's just like Doc. He wants to share it if you're willing to listen and allow him to just kind of go. So those are the influences for me. And then some of the players. You learn a lot from your players, especially in the NBA. Because the one thing that you find at professional sports level is those that last and those that stick, they really know the game. It's not just their talent, because you have to have talent to get into the league, but it's what you do above and beyond and with that talent.
Yes, sir. So the players in the league, I mean, y'all are almost in a partnership. I mean, how they do is how you do, and how you do is how they do. So who are some of the players that you learned the most from? Because maybe some high school coaches out there watching might not understand this, but the more guys I've talked to in the professional ranks, they all say the same thing, Coach. So who are some of those guys?
Yeah, well, the people, the names that people would know were who we had in Boston, whether that be our early years where we had Shaq, where we had Gary Payton, then the later years when we were really good and won the championship, where we had Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen. All of those that I just mentioned are in the Hall of Fame. So those are the ones that I coached. Then because of what I did in my early years in coaching and in the off seasons, I did a lot of skill development workouts for players. So players I've worked with, LeBron, Kobe, Steph, Kevin Durant. I'm probably missing some.
Yeah, but Coach, that's enough, Coach. You said LeBron, you said Kevin Durant, I mean Shaq. I mean, good gosh.
Yeah, and they're there for a reason. I often say when I do my speaking, either in the corporate world or in the sports world, it doesn't matter. The best are the best for a reason. And those who end up becoming their best usually try and study those who currently are the best. So what you learn is you can learn from many, many people. And even though it's supposed to be coach here, player here, that would be ludicrous for us to think that there is. Now eventually the coach has to make a final decision in a game, right? But along the way, we're learning from each other. So I'm sure I learned even more from Kevin Garnett than I taught him, right? And it's the little things that they teach you. The big things, the system things, how you want to run your offense, how you want to run your defense, right? Where you want to substitute, how you want to run your practices, those things. But it might be the little thing where he learns how to use his lower body to get better position than trying to push and shove where you get a foul called on you. It's the subtleties of the game, because as we often say, little things become big things in big moments of big games, right? So it's the little things that you really need to learn to separate yourself.
After doing 180 of these podcasts from January to August, and you're the only second basketball coach that I've had, but a lot of the best coaches never become head coaches. Some of the best coaches are just guys that are like, they're the grinders. They're the guys that do the work behind the scenes. Who are some of those coaches that you worked with along the way that, like you said, people may not know, but they are just as good as the guys who, stand and wear the suit?
Yeah. Well, some of the guys I worked with went on to be, really good NBA coaches, head coaches. Tom Thibodeau has had success. He's now with the Knicks. He was with the Timberwolves. He was also with the Bulls, and he's had success in his tenure as a head coach. Lawrence Frank, who we also had. Mike Woodson, who was a coach in the NBA with a number of teams and is currently the coach at Indiana University. So there are those that, and then Tyronn Lue, who won a championship with the Cleveland Cavaliers, is now with the Clippers, and who was with Steve Kerr this past month with the USA team over in the FIBA World Cup games. So had an opportunity to work with a lot of guys who were assistant coaches, right, who worked their way up to become head coaches. That was not the route that I wanted to take once I got into the NBA, because I had my fill of it at the college level. Not good or bad, just had my fill of it. Um, so I would say there's those guys, and then the names of the guys who didn't become head coaches but were very, very good would be names that none of your people would even know. But trust me, they know a lot about the game too. There's only 30 NBA head coaching jobs in the world, and there
Wow.
is only 30, excuse me, 3 assistants that you're allowed to sit on the bench with the head coach. They call it the front bench. So there's only 90 of those. So there's only 120 in the world who can say they're on the bench of an NBA team. So anyone who's on that bench is pretty dang good.
They're the elite of the elite. I mean, that's like special forces. I mean, and this is a global game. It's not like American football. Like basketball is everywhere. Everybody's up in arms. I mean, coach, like I had a young coach come to me and say, Troy, I'm at this job now and I can't connect with these kids. Like the kids told me I don't look like them. I don't understand them. I mean, the greatest coaches of all time, coach, you have Nick Saban on your website saying a quote about you, coach. Like, how can guys like Nick Saban do it for this long and be able to connect with their players, even though they may not look like them or they may not be from the same place as them?
Yeah, it's not so much the look, it is the connection. The ability to figure out with each new era that we coach, or each new generation that we coach, how do we have to coach them, right? It is now more of you think you mentioned it early on, or maybe offline. It's more of a partnership in today's game, right? It isn't like when I was playing, where the coach just said, "This is what you do," and you do it. We probably towards the end of my college career, we were thinking about asking the question, why are we doing it? But it wasn't there yet. Now it's totally there. So I think the best coaches understand the power of relationships. Like if you ask the best coaches in our league or in the NBA, and I've spoken to Major League Baseball teams, I've spoken to NFL teams, so I've been around coaches at all three of the major sports. Haven't spoken in hockey yet, but they'll tell you that maybe the most important thing they do is not so much the X's and O's, but it's the relationship building with the players. Because it doesn't matter how good Kevin Garnett is, it doesn't matter how good Tom Brady is. If you can't get them to understand what you want done, and then eventually do what you want done, and then correct them on the things that they maybe didn't do well, you won't get the best of Tom Brady, of Kevin Garnett, of Kobe Bryant. So you've got to be able it's not really about what makes them tick in today's game, although that's important. Whether you're in the corporate world or the sports world, you have to know what makes your people tick. But I think that's third on the list, right? I know all the books say it's number one, but I believe it's third. And to me, if that's third, then what's one and two? And in no particular order, what makes them tick is important, but even more so is what makes them talk. Because if I can get them to talk, I'll have maybe the ability to find to a greater depth what actually is making them tick. And then the second thing is maybe not so much what makes them tick, but what makes them listen. Because if I can get them to listen, I can get them to maybe change the way they tick. So how do you get to talk? How do you get to listen? We believe it's through the formation of relationships which allow you to connect with that player so that they're ready to receive. They may not act on it, but all you can do is send the message. And how you send it is important too, because different kids and players receive messages differently. So there's a lot to this. And the big thing is paying attention to who you're coaching, right? Talking to who you're coaching, figuring out how is the best way to communicate with them. Because it's not, the most powerful communication is that communication that you have one-on-one with the player. Sure, as a coach, you're going to talk to the whole team and get in front of them. But the day-to-day nitty-gritty, getting the most out of each other, those really come down to one-on-ones. And you got to be good in the one-on-one game.
I mean, coach, the things you're saying, I mean, some people would probably want to know, well, how do you, run this play or this defense? But you're breaking it down to the most elementary forms of communication, which are talking and listening. And everybody that I've talked to about Bill Belichick says Bill Belichick is the greatest listener of all time. Have you met Coach Belichick? And is listening, I mean, talking and listening, Coach, is something that kids don't do now because of text messaging. So, how do you get them to talk? And I mean, have you heard the same thing about Coach Belichick?
Yeah. Because Doc Rivers and Bill became friends, and both of them shared ideas on what we're doing with each other's teams. As a matter of fact, they both had each other speak. Doc spoke to them, and then Bill spoke to us. But just talking about championship mindset, what it takes to give yourself a chance. That's all you ask in pro sports, to give yourself a chance to be in that final group of 4, which eventually gets you into maybe the final group of 2, which eventually gets you to the point where you're the champion, which we were in 2008. Yes, I have heard that about Bill Belichick. I know for sure that is the question. That is a characteristic of Nick Saban's. When I was down at Alabama and was speaking down there, and after I got done, I spent about a half hour with Nick in his office, and we were just talking about a bunch of things. And he was so inquisitive. I went in that meeting prepared to out-question him, but he, in fact, out-questioned me. Because, like he said to me, and this isn't, I'm not here to promote my book or anything. This is a lesson I learned from him. He said, Kevin, you don't know, but I use your book with our team. And I said, well, let me ask you this, Coach, how do you use it? He said, well, here's the deal. The messages from coaches have pretty much been the same. This is him talking, since I've entered the game of football. But yet the kids have changed a little bit. So what I need to do is I need to keep trying to find new ways to say the same messages. And he said, your book has the way you use your words has allowed me to say these things, but in a different, fresh way that these guys haven't heard before. So the lesson isn't go get Kevin's book. The lesson is he's a consummate learner. Right? And so is Bill Belichick. When Bill and Doc get together, they try and out-question each other. They're willing to share, but they're, what you find about the best of the best that I've been around, they have the curiosity gene. They want to know everything that they need to know, but understand they don't know. And the best way to do that is to be a great question asker.
Coach, I told you what I'm going through right now, and I started this podcast in January. It used to be a one-day clinic, and Coach, I was FaceTiming Jim McNally. That was the offensive line coach of Anthony Munoz, probably the greatest living offensive line coach. And he is a lifelong learner. He's 80 years old. He can do 15 pull-ups. He studies football every day. So goats make goats. And I mean, if you want to be the GOAT, you got to overcome adversity. So, like, Michael Jordan was cut. I mean, how important is overcoming adversity in this recipe to being great?
Yeah, I think relative to adversity, to failure, to mistakes, the first thing I would say is join the club. Any coach we've talked about has encountered those 3 things, right? So I think what you have to do is admit but not accept. Admit that a failure happened, a mistake was made, adversity I went through. Admit that it happened. Like, I screwed up, right? But then don't accept it. Keep moving on. It's been said many, many times, but a failure is what happened to you. It's not who you are, unless you let it keep happening to you, then that in fact gives us proof that you are that, right? And just like everything, what you mentioned, you went through something, right? Well, we've all gone through something. When Doc was let go by the Philadelphia 76ers, one of the conversations that I had with him, I had with everyone who calls me sometimes when they get let go. And that's this: it couldn't all be their fault. You had to have something to do with it. Take care of what your part was in you being let go, you being disciplined, you being whatever it is, whatever was your part in it. Try and clean that up and make sure it doesn't happen again, right? Because really, everything, we never wanted players who were blamers, complainers, or played the victim, right? And because that just leads to losing, and it leads to almost a sprint to mediocrity, if not below mediocrity, right? Because all the players and coaches we've talked about, they'll admit their mistakes. Kevin Garnett, first guy to admit his mistakes if he caused us to lose a game, or if he felt he caused us to lose the game. Doc Rivers, I don't know how many times he said, tonight's my fault. It's my fault, right? That play I called in the fourth quarter with 12 seconds left, bad call. Bad call, right? So, but in order to take ownership, you've got to have some belief in yourself and belief in your system, right? Because no systems beat everybody. They don't. As a matter of fact, Stan Van Gundy, who was a coach in the NBA, he says something, very simple but very powerful. He said, the NBA is the ultimate humility league.
Ooh.
Once
so is the NFL, not for long, Coach.
Yeah.
Yes.
When you're about ready to beat that team or that guy, they beat you, right? So you will be humbled. You're just not aware of when.
And that's, like Kobe said, that to be the ultimate competitor, losing has to be exciting. And Brad Stevens, who took over the Celtics, he said that was the toughest thing for him, from going from college to going to the NBA, was that in the NBA, you're going to lose almost half your games. Whereas when he was a Butler, he barely ever lost until it was the Final Four. So, you have to be, it's not being okay with losing, but it's about learning, right, Coach? That's why I like pro football. That's why I like Sundays. It's always competitive. NBA too, Coach. So talk about that.
Yeah, I think, our film sessions were always about learning and not blaming, right? It was always about the point of improvement, not the personal attack. So for us, we couldn't wait to get to the film. And because we kept it a learning session, our guys weren't weary of, we got film session tomorrow. As a matter of fact, they could probably tell us, because let's say we played in Indiana Monday night, and then in the NBA, you have to fly to the next city immediately after the game. So on that flight to say, San Antonio, our guys were probably watching the film too. Not every one of them, but some of them, right? Because they wanted to see what their part was in that loss, or the good things that they did that they have to continue doing, right? Because, what you find out is there's two types of people in this world. And one of the types become ultimately very successful. The other eventually will get caught and passed. And the two types of people are know-it-alls, which I personally don't like. And there are learn-it-alls.
Wow.
And we wanted to have an organization filled with learn-it-alls. And that's that curiosity gene, right? So never being satisfied with the current knowledge you have, because, not only is the world moving fast today and technology moving fast, but so are our games, right? We were talking about Coach Saban. He changed from the old kind of, get your smash mouth football to now, especially during the Lane Kiffin years, right, where they really opened it up So he understood and does understand that you have to adjust to the times. You know, the one thing that you find that you can't control as a coach is the times, right? The times almost dictate to us the adjustments we have to make. Now, that doesn't mean full scale change, right? That means that you adjust to how the game is being played. And when you're in the world of recruiting, you better not be kind of an old timer, smash mouth football guy, right? Because that's exciting to the skill positions.
Yeah, Coach Saban talks about rat poison and how, I mean, sometimes you learn more from a loss than you do a win. So, like, how do you fight against the rat poison, the good things that are being said, the winning, and winning? You don't look at that film as hard when you lose. I mean, like last week, I told our team, a team that's lost 2 games in a row is the most dangerous team in the world. That comes from Coach Saban. Like, they've been practicing hard for 2 weeks and they haven't won yet. Like, they want to give it their all. So, yeah, talk about that, Coach, the rat poison, the good things.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind there is if you're truly a quality program, a championship, someone who's really vying for championships, wants to become our best, you have respect. You have respect for the game. You have respect for your opponent. And you have respect for everyone on the team who's doing what they do each and every practice every day. It's fun to be the quarterback. It's not fun to be the center, right? You got to respect the center, because if your lineman on the snap, your lineman just stood up and opened their stance and just let that defense come at the quarterback would understand how important the line is.
Yes,
right?
sir.
So it's the respect in those 3 areas: for the game, the opponent, and our teammate. And when you have that respect, you understand Stan Van Gundy's quote: "You can be humbled at any second." We used to have a thing that it was a mantra that we talked about, which was this: the Lakers practice too.
Ooh.
About that revelation, the Lakers practice too. So, for us, it became every rep, every day. Every rep, every day. The other mantra was this rep right now. This rep right now. And that took us into the film room too. This clip right now. This clip to help us improve. You see, it's usually the guys who want the easy way that don't want to watch the film. It's the guys who think that there is a switch that you can turn on and off, that isn't worried about that opponent this week, right?
They don't respect their opponent. And then that's going to lead to them being humbled.
Yeah. Or even the individual humbled in a matchup. Whether it be the opponent plays majority of man-to-man and you're a receiver and you can't get open. You're humbled, right? Well, maybe if you'd have studied like the NBA, I was just reading an article on Von Miller, right? And he has in the off season a pass rushing seminar where he invites the best pass rushers in the game to come together and they exchange ideas. And the detail they get into, from even the point of where do you do they call it the jab step, which we call it in our game, but he had called it in this article. He said, when do you execute the jab? Well, one of the players said it's on my 3rd step. Step 1 and step 2 gets him thinking I'm coming right at him. Then on the 3rd, well, then another player came in and said, no. It depends on where the interaction is. If he hits you on step 1, you got no jab left, right? So they got into it into the minute detail. That's what the best do.
Yes.
Right? And the best respect that the guy they're going up against, they're practicing too, right? And it only takes one play to maybe beat a team that's better than you. And Doc used to always say to our team, especially when we were especially during our early years when we were trying to build the Celtics, we weren't very good. But he would say when we go up against maybe at that time the Miami Heat were really good. Hey, maybe over the course of 10 games, people think they would beat us most of those games. But What about tonight?
Mm.
What about today? This may be the one that we get. This may be the one that the 0-2 team you're playing gets, because you guys are thinking you're only as good as you play today.
Mm.
So how are you going to play today? We wanted to, in the games where let's say we were supposed to beat a team soundly, and we did this most games anyway, we competed against our standards, really, not so much against the opponent. Our strategy was against our opponent, but our effort and our execution was against our standards. And we felt if we played to the level of our standards, right, that more times than not, we'll be in the game and probably win the game. So for us, when you play against your standards, it doesn't matter who you're playing against. You're playing against yourself, right?
Mm.
Now you need the strategy and the game adjustments to beat that team. I'll give you that. But every time that your hand goes into the grass, right, you're taking the strategy and then you're doing it at the standards that you guys have set for yourselves. So the standards are what help you beat the teams you're supposed to beat and not get upset. The standards keep you from settling, right? So, that for us, or skipping steps, it keeps you from skipping steps too. So that was a long answer to a short question. So what else you got as we?
Well, I got a question here from Coach Hutch. He's my strength coach. I need to know about Mr. Kevin Eastman's book. I'm going to order a set for my class. He's a PE health teacher at LC Bird High School, Coach. So if you could just tell him what's the name of your book, he wants to get some.
Yeah, well, the name of the book is Why the Best Are the Best. And yeah, so, and that was a burning question for me that I had ever since I was in junior high and first started to fall in love with the game. Like, why do some guys make and some don't? Why do some guys get more out of less talent than those with more talent get less out of themselves? What is that? And the great fortune I've had is the access I have to, I guess, people who think, people think these people are celebrities, whether it's being in Nick Saban's office or sitting down with Dabo Sweeney in his office, and who also uses the book with his team. But because I had that access to so many people, I'm able to get some real high quality answers. And the basic question that I wanted to answer was, how did you become what you became? How did you get to the level you've gotten? And that doesn't mean it was just a Kevin Garnett, who's a Hall of Famer. It could have also been a James Posey, who we had. How did he get into the league, become his best? Because there's two best in this world. There's the best and there's my best. And we just wanted our guys to be their best. Because if you say to someone, you got to be the best at what you do, that's a daunting task for some. They can't handle it, right?
That's the GOAT argument. That's the GOAT argument, Coach.
Yeah.
There's the best and that's your best.
Yeah.
I love it, man.
So, and like in the NBA, everyone thinks the NBA is a league of stars. No, the NBA is an overwhelming preponderance of role players. There are way many more role players than there are stars in the NBA, right? So the book, what I found out from asking that question is there were certain words that were used in almost every answer. And I came up with 25 of them, that when someone asks you, how did you become your best, right? Words like preparation, words like intentional, words like unrequired, words like truth, right? These are all words that came up. So the book is kind of about that and what those words mean and how do you apply it in your life and how does it help you, not just in athletics, but also in whatever you'll take on the rest of your life. So, we've been very fortunate. I mean, in your sport, I guess two of the named teams, Clemson and Alabama, they use it, right? I just spoke to the University of Florida football team, University of Minnesota football team. They use it, right? So, and I don't say that to promote as much as if every one of your athletes did the things in the book, well, I know they work because I've seen them work, right? and they've worked for average athletes. I remember meeting Peyton Manning down in Miami, and we were talking about certain things, and he said, for being an NFL player, I got a lot of limitations. Like, I may be slower than our linemen. Right? My spiral isn't always tight. He said, but I do know this. My preparations will always trump my limitations, right? How well I prepare. And if you talk to any of the great players or anyone who's been successful, preparation is a huge part of it. So what your guy can do, what your strength coach can do is just go on to our website, kevineastman.net. And that way, if he orders them, I'll also personally sign them, because we can send them out of our warehouse versus say
Amazon. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
That is awesome, Coach. Coach, life is the greatest teacher. And I mean, but in order to learn, you must listen. And you're a great listener. So, Coach, I appreciate you coming on. Is there anything else that you would like to leave the coaches and the people that are watching? I mean, it's just a blessing, Coach. Thank you for coming on today.
No, I think that probably the biggest thing is never stop learning about your craft, right? And also in today's world, never stop trying to figure out how to reach the people that you coach. And some guys are easy to reach, but it's really the ones that are more difficult to reach. Keep working with them until you can find that in. And I do know this, when you share your heart, you can generally get into someone's heart. So one of the things that we always tried to do was share with our players our stories, right? And it doesn't mean that the first time you talk to someone, hey, let's sit down and I want to spend the next 7 hours telling you everything I did so that now we have a relationship. No, it just kind of happens over time. I've had some of my best conversations with players when it was a 3 or 4 minute conversation on the court before practice started. You never know where, right? And there are ways that you can be a little stealthy, a little trickery, and get a guy into a subject with them thinking it's actually just, what's the word nowadays? Organic. I hate that word, but it's a good word right now, right? So never stop communicating, never stop sharing, never stop learning, and never stop working, because ultimately, to be successful, you've got to work at a pretty decent level. Now, if you work smart and efficient, you can still have a home life, right? There's a lot of coaches who win on the field and win on the court and they lose at home, right? So try and win both places. And the way you do that is through priority management, not time management. I read all the time management books. They don't help. Or they didn't help me. Now, when I started to do priority management, like, I have what I call my must-dos, not just my to-dos each day, but I have a max of 3 must-dos. And by the end of the day, I got to get them done. I got to get them done.
Because what are the 3?
Whatever it is that day, right? One of the must-dos might be, Kevin Garnett was pissed off yesterday after the game, boy, and he was hot and flaming. And one of my must-dos might be, I got to talk to Kevin and find out why. Now, that's not a conversation that everybody in the world looks forward to, but it was a must-do, right? Because the longer a problem or challenge festers, the larger it gets and the harder it is to solve. So that might be a must-do. There may be something at home that's a must-do, right? Like, I must, as crazy as our schedule is in coaching, you have maybe a date with your wife that night and you're leaving at 6 o'clock. Well, you better get home at 5:30 and take a shower and go out, right? Rather than at 7:30 say, honey, I'm still at the office, right? So it doesn't matter what the must-dos are. They're different for all of us each and every day, right? So one of my must-dos right now is for the book that one of the things I'm going to work on today is anywhere from a 1 to 2 day training program for coaches based on the book. how to utilize everything with your team. So what I'm going to do now is read the book as if I've never even known what was in it or that I've written it. What do I get out of it? How can I use it? How can I make this simpler for someone to understand? How can that coach who coaches women's softball get something out of this part of the book? And the same part of the book, somebody who coaches baseball, right? So that's one of my must-dos today. I've got to get through X amount of pages of deeper dive into this.
You're self-scouting. I mean, you're watching your film like you're the other coach, saying, well, how can I beat these guys? What do they do? You know, you're self-scouting, coach. I mean,
yeah, and well, hopefully at the end of the scout, I'll like the book because if I don't, no one gonna buy it. So no,
coach. I mean, if anybody's listened to the last 40 minutes, I mean, coach, I'm from Route 10, Virginia. You know where I'm from, Chesterfield County, and I'm sitting here talking to you on a podcast. So the Lord takes care of children and fools. That's what Chan Gailey told me, and he said, I'm not a child. So, coach, I'm a fool.
It's amazing what you get when you ask.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. God bless you, coach. I'm going to press end. I just like to chat with you just for a second, coach, all fair. But thank you. God bless you.